Your Excellencies, honorable members of Parliament, senators, dear colleagues, dear members of the Verande, and Prof. Andrea, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to welcome you here in the Verande, the Flemish window to the world in Brussels. The idea for this symposium, or this lecture series, originated already many months ago, when we found German, Flemish, and Dutch economists, philosophers, and politicians ready to collaborate on the subject of further European integration despite the euro crisis. The result of this collaboration was published in a book with the title Flanders and Europe, Necessity and Limits of Solidarity. We analyzed the design flaws of the Eurozone and the various solutions from different perspectives, that is to say, with or without temporarily exits of specific countries. Opinions to the desirability of further integration varied among the authors, but some consensus was found about the following economic and political principles. Let me briefly sum these up. This is what we agreed upon. Firstly, sustainable solidarity requires responsibilization and discipline. Secondly, the democratic deficit of the European Union needs to be addressed. Thirdly, more checks and balances are required. And finally, and this was the conclusion of the Flemish authors, the design flaws and the institutional labyrinth of the Belgian federal state must under no circumstances be repeated on a European scale. The cornerstones of the European construction were laid in the economic and moral wasteland after the Second World War. The European Union, as we know it today, started with simple agreements on coal and steel, things that now seem so outdated to us, but that were back then the ingredients of the war machinery. In fact, the common market was just a way to achieve the goal of peace and integration before it became a problem itself. A good economy may not be the precondition for, but it certainly is a catalyst of peace. And since the Second World War, the European Union can be proud of its track record of ensuring and enforcing peace. We even received the Nobel Prize for Peace, and our political leaders subsequently proved that they were worthy of it, since they could agree on who was going to collect it. I sincerely doubt, however, you will agree on this, that we will ever receive the Nobel Prize for Economics with our union. It is not easy to defend the need for European integration in times of prosperity, but in times of recession and crisis, this task sometimes seems almost impossible. Why are Europeans always so negative? An Indian friend recently asked me. This is the best place in the world, he figured. Well, maybe it is, maybe it still is, but we shouldn't lower our standards. Our problems are small with regard to those of other continents. But we need to deal with our economic problems quickly now and effectively. There's a sense of urgency today, and there is, I think, a willingness to act. But there is no consensus yet on how to act. And you can see it here. To my opinion, solidarity without responsibility will drive us apart rather than unite us. For the time being, we need to help each other in the European Union. I don't mind, since it goes against my pride as a European citizen to condone poverty in our union. I believe solidarity is just, because it is our moral duty to care for others. Or isn't it? Is solidarity really a moral imperative, and to what extent? Pope Franciscus wants a poor church for poor people. That's his good right. I, however, want a wealthy Europe for wealthy Europeans. And the best way to do so is not by continuous transfers that in the end will make the rich poor as well. Since things are serious tonight, I will be talking about serious issues, allow me to shed a humoristic light on our moral dilemma. Poverty is not a virtue. If you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime. Now, I sometimes have the impression that this is the European translation. If you give a man some money, he'll be able to pay off his debts. One day, giving a money press, he'll cause inflation. Poverty is not a virtue, caritas is. You can make a good religious or moral case of caritas, but frankly, In politics, we cannot use the moral imperative, nor can we use the Sermon of the Mount as described in Matthew. In politics, the right hand needs to know what the left hand is spending, and that is quite a lot, ladies and gentlemen. We don't need evangelical legitimation for providing subprime loans. We need accountability and transparency. Now we perceive solidarity as a virtue, but to what extent something is really a virtue? May I draw a comparison to one of the most basic rules in toxicology? Only the dose makes the poison. Sola dosis facit venenum. This toxicological rule is in fact a general rule that can be applied elsewhere. Allow me to explain this with the etymology of the Latin word virtue, or the Latin word virtus, which means courage. When we are confronted with a challenging or dangerous situation, we might be afraid. Fear could make us run away. In that case, we would be a coward. We could also choose to be fearless and to take high risks that no cost-benefit can justify. In that case, we would be reckless. In the middle of those two extremes lies true courage. Cowardice and recklessness are the opposites. They are vices, not virtues. A virtue is associated with modesty and temperance. And I think you see where I'm heading with this. Not all gradations of solidarity can be considered to be a virtue. Giving too much is just as much a vice as giving too little. Virtuous solidarity is limited solidarity. In order to elaborate further on this, we need to address solidarity from the point of view of the insurance theory. An insurance policy is an organized and efficiently managed form of solidarity, whereby the individual seeks safety with a collective. If we consider solidarity to be a contract, it should be organized along concepts like affordable premium, good faith, transparency, subrogation, mitigation, liability, and risk management. Love and compassion is good, but every parent knows that sometimes punishment is better and necessary. Insurance companies try to control the side effects that limited liability causes. And believe me, there are some serious side effects. There's the free rider phenomenon, there's moral hazard, and there is the Samaritan's dilemma, which is a metaphor, again, a evangelical, for the situation whereby one is enjoying solidarity so much that one does not try to improve one's own situation anymore. Modesty and temperance, the essence of Greek philosophy. The words "know thyself" and "never too much" were engraved at the Temple of Delphi, from where the famous oracles originated. Let this be a reminder for European politicians when they are plotting the course out of the crisis. When at sea, it is better to set the course by looking at the stars instead of at other ships. Otherwise, we will go from this to that with the European Union. Everything else would be, and I continue with a maritime comparison, shifting deck chairs on the Titanic. Money printing and continuous bailouts are no sustainable solution for the euro crisis. If the cost of Concordia, which means German Eintracht, and in Dutch Eendracht, the cost of Concordia, if that gets too high, well, you'll end up like the ship. I don't know whether the Cyprus crisis, which is evolving even now, was addressed properly, but I did hear some very intelligent remarks from German politicians and from a Dutch politician, banker. In fact, German political opinion is changing, and this is to a certain extent the result of ceaseless efforts of its eminent economists. I think Flemish public opinion is also on the side of Germany, but I doubt this shows in Belgian foreign policy. The Flemish position on sustainable solidarity is much like the German one, but our voice is not yet heard. My story is a Flemish story, maybe the Flemish story, and it does not differ from the German story. What we don't need in Europe is the moral supremacy and raised finger of the North and the "didn't I tell you" rhetoric. But on the other side, I think some more respect for the European institutions and the northern net payers ought to have a place in the south. Comparing, for example, Angela Merkel with less sympathetic German politicians is, to my opinion, counterproductive, infantile, and irresponsible. Why don't we all take an example from Ireland and the way it is recovering from its deep crash through severe austerity measures that are hurting its population, and how at the same time Irish politicians devote themselves piously to the presidency of the European Council of Ministers. What we need in Europe is respect, modesty, and temperance, and above all, the understanding that there is no salvation outside Europe. Extra Europa nulla salus est. I thank you.